all gathered here today for one overarching purpose, to bring about a nature positive future, obviously. And this is the NTC Now. It's one of the gatherings of the Naturetech Collective. We're a global community of people and their organizations that are working relentlessly across categories towards this nature positive future. So Franziska and Stuart, thank you so much for being here today. Before we dive into all of this regulatory talk, can you tell us more about yourselves and refinq? Maybe Franziska first.
Yes, happy to. Hello, Servus from Vienna, lovely Austria. I'm one of the co-founders of refinq, and me together with Lukas and Markus, my other two co-founders, started refinq. Actually, my background was more doing sales and business development, but spoken to a lot of CEOs during my time at the Financial Capital magazine, and somehow I realized they need, all of them, more transparent data about nature. And this was how refinq was born and how we actually worked pretty hard the past 2 years to build this nature intelligence hub. And that's why I'm also happy that Stuart, our head of science, is joining us today. Please, Stuart, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Yes, so my name's Stuart Auld. I've described myself, Franziska will probably be sick of hearing this, as a recovering academic. I used to be a university lecturer studying what supplies and what strips out biodiversity from landscapes, from freshwater landscapes in Chernobyl through to North American landscapes and where I am now in central Scotland. So I'm interested in biodiversity, but communicating it in a way that businesses can engage with. And that's why I was really excited to come and work for refinq. And I'm happy to be here today. So they vary according to locality. They vary according to precisely what they want to achieve. But the one thing that is in common across them is providing a mechanism, a framework, a language which corporates can talk about their sustainability impact. So some of them are more about the reporting. CSRD, for example, the Corporate Sustainability and Reporting Directive. You see me glancing across. I'm not ashamed. I have to look across and remind myself of precisely what all of these are all the time of the actual acronyms. But CSRD is about disclosure and about reporting. Whereas you have the other big European one is the CSDDD, which is more about changing the culture, changing behaviors. If CSRD is about measuring impacts on biodiversity and how your company is affected by biodiversity, the CSDDD is about building a transition plan. It's about having a strategy, right? So there are differences in how much money and turnover is required to have to do one framework versus the other. But if you want to boil it down, it is reporting and it is building a culture of change. There are others like EUDR, which is about ensuring that you are, if you're selling products into the EU, that they don't come from a landscape that has been deforested, right? So that is about, it doesn't matter if you're European or non-European as a company. If you're selling into the EU, you need to show that your cotton, your soya, your whatever has not come from an environment that has been stripped of trees. So that these regulations, it's easy to think and use the term regulatory burden. I think that's kind of a language that we use, but actually they're tools. They're there to make us think about what corporates want to achieve. Some might view it as, you know, a burden, something you have to pay for to get done, but it's mainly about instilling positive behaviors, I think. So CSRD is more like if you're within being a European company, and the CSDDD is if you are selling into Europe, and EUDR is if you're selling into Europe. So an example on the ground, say you're growing cotton, and you are a company in a non-EU in West Africa, and you are farming cotton and you want to sell, you would want to be building your approach to measuring for EUDR to know from which farms you could sell to the EU and which you could not, and you'd have to seek other markets. So that's an example. Like EUDR is about selling into the EU, CSDDD if you are making stuff to sell into the EU. Well, the main thing is businesses, they're thinking about what they actually have to do. So and Franziska has talked to a lot more businesses than I have, but obviously please chip in. But my experience is that a lot of corporates want to do good, and it's about finding. There's a fear about greenwashing. There's a fear that if they start doing something, they'll be told they're doing it wrong. And so actually looking at, again, going back to this language of regulatory burden, actually just having a rule book and an understanding of how to approach these things is really important. Now, many of us in this, I say room, this virtual room, will have been a bit disappointed, mild language, for what's happened to the EU omnibus. But actually, the big corporates involved are still, they've gone through the process of thinking about how they need to approach their nature-related risks. Like the culture has changed. And I've used the example, like I buckle my kids into the car, not because the 1986 Highways Act mandates that I have to put a seatbelt on. I buckle them into the car because I don't want them to die if there's an accident. And now businesses have approached their nature-related risks. They have built teams, they have built capacity, they have the experts getting involved, they're having conversations with providers in this room, to us. They realize that, oh crap, I need to engage with nature-related risk because it's going to affect my business. So yeah, there is actually stuff to be really optimistic about.
And maybe one thing to add on, we have to be honest, still it's pretty the beginning of the journey. They are still start to realize what is in there for them. So they still need like a kind of guidance. And somehow for us, it's relieving that it's not just about the reporting issue, but really about resilience, really like setting up strategies. And still, we have to be honest, they are overwhelmed by the topic. We still need to educate them about the holistic interdependency of nature. But there we are, and we're happy to talk you a bit and dive deeper into it, how we do it, and how we all can help them to understand the case a bit better. Yeah, I mean, it's one topic doing and ticking the box about regulatory, but the impact businesses have in a resilience business strategy. And at the end, this is actually what all the regulation was actually based on, to set up a resilience strategy for economies, for our holistic world and interdependencies. So unfortunately, it gone somehow wrong. So it's, for us, it was already a hot topic last year to really pivot strongly far away from any CSRD regulatory into risk management, because we've seen an absolutely necessity, especially because we are defining nature not just from a biodiversity perspective, but also from a climate risk perspective. Also because we are putting nature from the systemic view, and also we are translating it into the first approaches so that the sustainability manager can actually speak the language of the CFO. And how can they do it? In the way that they use the wording, that they use the metric. So we try to develop these features in the way of financial implications, which are absolutely necessary, so that the subjects is really pretty close in between sustainability managers and risk controllers. And actually, we are pretty successful with this approach in such a short time. Yeah, we are kind of a SAP for nature. You need to imagine most of the clients, even bigger enterprises, they are diving step by step into the topic. So with physical climate risk, it's somehow really relatable to them. They see the wildfires in California, they see the floodings in Valencia. It's getting not just in the news, but it's around them because most probably they face in one of their production sites the past 2-3 years some kind of flooding or hail or wildfire or whatsoever. So this is the first approach into like how we do it and which models we have been developing and where we are somehow assessing from a holistic approach in different climate risk scenarios, the first step of them. We have to admit this is like the entry point and the beginning of a journey a client is doing with us. There are a few of them who already are taking the holistic systemic view and also including nature, aka biodiversity and ecosystem into it. But in our pretty young company journey, we are seeing now, after the second year, how the companies are also mature in the way that they are using wants to upsell in biodiversity and ecosystem data and modeling. And still, how is risk resilience, to answer your question pretty clear, it's still the beginning in the way that they want to see where they have a risk, not just on the production side, but also in their value chain or temporary entities. The second step is then like setting up a strategy, but still the baseline is having great data. The baseline is quantifying nature in the way of first financial implication. And then we are approaching step by step in different departments, in strategies and target setting, also in the way of working pretty close with restoration, monitoring, and different projects, etc., to get at the end the nature positivity we are all aiming for.
The data the corporates need to collect depends specifically on what they're doing, right? So I'll get onto this in a bit when I show our platform, because we collect data on, we report data on a number of different from freshwater through to land through to, so on a number of different spheres, so corporates can understand precisely where their impacts and dependencies lie. But the key thing is that they do need credible data and insights. So there's a lot. Sorry, I'm being a little bit garbled here, but data's one thing. Collecting lots of data. People think they want data, but what they need is insights. It's about refining that data into something that actually describes a problem. And that's the trick, and that's what a lot of us in here are trying to do, right? For us, it can be measuring biological oxygen demand in water to understand how nutrient runoff from an agricultural system is affecting a freshwater landscape. That's what I'd be talking about if I was talking to a big group of farming operation. But if I was doing something if there was a restoration reforesting program, you could have equally ground-based operations where you had camera traps that were recording how mammals were returning to a landscape, or ecoacoustics to look at bird diversity as it returns. So finding the data imperative is about talking to experts who can tell you the right kind of data to address the questions that you're looking to address. Excuse me. At the corporate level, geospatial is great, like the approach that gives you that first view of your assets, your factory, your retail park, your farm, where it is and how it relates to the landscape. yeah. And the regulations, I mean, there's the EU Nature Restoration Law, and with the wider omnibus, there are specific requirements. But I say specific, there's still, excuse me, I don't know where this cough has come from. There's still, it's still about building a culture of the right of collecting data as opposed to being very prescriptive. Yeah. Yeah. So this, you have the mud that's washed down into a city, and you've got flooded factories, you have disrupted infrastructure, you have this went from something that the sustainability team, this is awful, this is an awful way in many ways to describe this, but it went from something that climate change is something we will have to worry about to it has happened to us. And I think it was Ronald Reagan that was like, a recession is when someone became unemployed, and a depression is when you lose your job. Well, we're reaching that kind of level with climate change now. So corporates are measuring nature and climate related risks because their farms are on fire and their factories are flooded and they're losing a lot of money. Now, we have a nature risk tool that provides location-based risk assessments. And this is getting away from the idea that you should be nature positive because it's a good thing to do, and you should be nature positive because it makes sound business sense, right? I'm really excited for the NTC Unconference coming up, because I really want to go to Sylvan's section on pitching to CFOs for that exact thinking. Now, our tool is designed to provide straightforward, here's the key one, straightforward biodiversity and climate insights on impacts and dependencies, because we need to communicate to an audience that wants to treat it as a risk, to look at how it will affect operations, how it will affect long-term strategy, how they can protect themselves. Now I'm going to go and jump into the tool now and talk about, because the specific examples are always good things. Yes. They tell a good story. I'm going to talk about a company called Nordzucker, which is a really massive producer of sugar in Europe and in Australia. It's second biggest sugar producer. Now I choose this because sugar is in pretty much all food value chains, right? If you eat it, if it's got any artificial sugar in it, it will it's relevant, right? So I am going to switch to the tool. Is everyone with me?
Yes.
Excellent. So our tool is location based, so it takes individual assets from companies. So you could look at it on a portfolio level, and then you can look at individual sites and understand your exposure to nature and climate risks. So if I go specifically to Nordzucker, you see here we have European assets, European farms which grow sugar beet, and then we have farms in northeastern Australia which grow sugar cane. Right, so when we go in, so you can look at a portfolio level and see the distribution of risks. So there are 11 assets, 11 locations. Now we measure things from soil erosion, water stress, biological oxygen demand, air pollution, functional connectivity, so that's how animals move through the landscape, measure of how connected up it is, soil organic carbon, and other measures, and we classify them according to how big the risk is, right? So you can see this at a portfolio level, like how many assets you have, how many specific risks you have associated with these elements. But the real advantage is when you go down to the individual location. So if you're on a particular farm, so this is a sugarcane farm in Australia, we have a measure, we have a score. This is really exposed to nature-related risks. As you can see here, it's got high impacts, so it has high effects on the wider environment, and it has high dependency, so it is a very high dependency, so it is strongly affected by nature on the landscape.
Right.
Here we can see we measure things like the air pollution, which is not so bad. You know, this is a really low risk. And when you can click on aspects of the tool that show what it is we're measuring, so this is PM10, so particulate matter that's 10 microns big. We picked that because it doesn't float away as much as the PM 2.5, so you can link it to a specific location. We then list where the data is from and how it's processed. So our products, all of us here, our products are built on trust, right? Corporates understandably do not want to be accused of greenwashing, and they want to show that they've done it right. And to be honest with you, those that are interested in greenwashing, we don't want to be involved in that. We'd rather measure it as it is and tell them what their risks actually are, because this is about them building a more resilient business, not about trying to look good or bad. So we have air pollution in the atmosphere. We have measures like a threatened species richness and biodiversity intactness index, which is kind of a measure of how the landscape looks now versus in the pre-human time. We have a measure of land cover change, functional connectivity, as I talked about. Pollination, like natural pollinators are a massive issue right now. Collapse in pollinators is huge, and we see this as a big problem here. We have other measures like soil organic carbon. If you've got high soil organic carbon, you've got soil that tends to hold on to water better in times of drought and tends not to repel it in times of flood. Good thing to have. I should have told an example with a southern Spanish for the Valencia example here, because that really is linked with flooding. Soil erosion we measure, and other like water stress, which is how much water is in the wider environment and how much is used by that asset. Biological oxygen demand, which is a measure of how much oxygen is required to maintain a healthy freshwater community. So it goes up a lot when you have big nutrient runoff. If it's full of nitrates, you get those algal blooms. It's, you know, and it can choke off freshwater environments. And then for certain ones, it's not so relevant here because it's a bit inland, but coastal eutrophication potential, which is related, it's like BOD, but for a coastal situation. So we have these measures and we've selected them because they do something that biodiversity and nature is very location specific and highly unique. And corporates want a way of comparing across environments, and that's a trade-off, and it's really difficult, right? So we have these measures because they allow an ability to compare across different locations whilst respecting the specificities of the nature in that location. Now, on this side, we have, you know, the list of specific nature dependencies. So you could have, and this is according to the LEAP framework, which many of you will have heard of.
Which we'll talk about next week, yeah.
Yeah. So things like rainfall pattern regulation, which in Eastern Australia makes sense, right? This is a specific dependency. Global climate regulation, soil quality regulation. So how that farm is affected by nature. And then we have impacts. Now, volume of water use isn't surprising in a sugarcane field. They use a lot of water to grow sugar. It is a thirsty crop. Now, with these kind of measures, Nordzucker can understand precisely what their exposure is to nature-related risks. And so we go from this, we have a score here of, oh, this has quite a high nature-related risk score. But we don't want this to just be an arbitrary number on its own, right? This is a conversation in this nature community we've had for a while. You create a number on its own, it becomes, is that just some abstract entity? We need a way of that they can prioritize things, but we need to show how it's made, what the actual specific risks are. So that's the thinking behind that. And then you can go to other sites and see what the other specific risks are in particular environments.
So first of all, we all, and especially your potential partners in crime, has to somehow be open-minded that the data will never be perfect, but it's important that you start. Why is it important? Because then earlier you get an understanding of it and how it impacts your business and which kind of dependency you have, then better you can set up a strategy against it. So starting now, then later is like one of the most important steps into it. And then, of course, talk to refinq. No joking. But we are actually in our whole nature intelligence or nature tech collective as well. We are somehow the first approach and the first partner with entering the field. And later on, we are also most probably will closer work together with some of you in the way of restoration, in the way of most probably also offsets or whatever. But first of all, the client needs to have a holistic view of it. So I would recommend speaking with all of the platforms who are providing us as we do, the first overview of all of your assets, and also don't overwhelm different departments in your own company which are not ready yet for it. So it's okay that just the sustainability department is starting. It's also okay if the risk management is leading the way into it and takes the sustainability department into it. What I'm also seeing with clients who are starting the journey with us, they are totally aware of it, that it's a journey where also the company and the data they can provide will develop by time. But they are completely aware that, first of all, with the location and the NACE code, we can already do the first assessment of your portfolio. And this is at the end, the beginning. And then we are refining in the way of additional data, what we are also implementing to quantifying nature in a financial way. We are assessing like water usage. We are also assessing the asset value so that we can really translate it into the CFO language. And then it's like, even so, most probably in a time of 6 months or later, that you really taking an honest step into biodiversity strategy. So okay. Begin with us. Yeah. It's actually a tricky question, and we all need to crack the code. And this is why I'm saying it imperatively. So we all need to really think closer about it. But I can tell you a bit some of my tricks and our tricks how to do it, so that we all can move into the direction. So first of all, speaking the language. And what is the language of the CFO? It's like cost reduction. So you really need to translate what does it mean if you don't act now, even if it's like the first minimal approaches, what is the cost of inaction? And this is like one of the most important terms for them. Also, what does it mean for the resilience strategy in the way of resource management, in the way of production management, in the way of the business model, if you don't set up a critical view and facing nature and the critical part and dependency we all have on it. So this is like one of the second parts of it. And then, of course, if you are speaking with, and if you're a sustainability manager of one of the bigger enterprises who can't get off of omnibus, the regulatory compliance, and also the consequences of legal risk, especially for the CEO, is like also an important step you need to argue with. So the second part of the whole journey, besides of the hard facts, which a CFO wants to hear, is showing real-world examples, showing combined with use cases from your industry, how others are entering it, how others, for example, did already first steps, success stories, also like risk, cost of inaction again, but based on examples. Real-world examples is like a second kind of touchy topic. And then it's about finding partners, starting into negotiations, and setting up also and aligning it with the strategic goals your company is facing in. And it has, again, different dimension. It begins from supply chain to investment attractiveness, in case also from insurance costs or credits, or if you need to negotiate also with investor relation management or even marketing, far beyond greenwashing. So as you can see, the entry points in tackling your CFO are really, really broad. And it's somehow, I think, an art for and a lovely task for all of you guys in this department to find a way of it, and also share. And again, imperative, share your good experience into it so that others can follow it.
Can I add something very quickly there? Yeah, that's obviously I agree, but I heard someone said to me a couple of months ago, and it really struck a chord, was about getting CFOs, CEOs to see investment in nature-related risks not as red, not as a debit, not as a budget that they should control and minimize, but as a proper investment. And a lot of that is incumbent on all of us to talk in a language, to do that, to communicate in a way that promotes that thinking.